Hello and welcome to today's Facebook Live on the topic of CQI Fellowship and some top tips. My name is Gareth Kingston, I'm the Head of Membership here at the CQI. I will be leading you through this presentation today. I'll be keeping my eye on the comments section of Facebook to see if there are any questions that come through. If there's anything that's not clear or anything you want more information on, then please don't hesitate to post comments in there. I'll do my best to answer them. If I can't answer them during the course of the session, I will certainly answer them after we've finished. So today we're going to cover the CQI Chartered Fellowship, so CQP, MCQI, FCQI, it's not a good start, CQP, FCQI. I'll run quickly through the membership grades, try and explode some myths about fellowship, and then I'll lead you through the process, what you need to do to apply. Focus on some key areas. One is CPD, the other is the main membership criteria for fellowship and the evidence you need to produce. I'll talk about the interview and what you could expect at the fellowship interview, and finish with some top tips which will help you to put together a really strong fellowship application. So, very briefly, these are the CQI membership grades. The dotted line between member and fellow indicates that whereas all of the others you can apply directly into those grades, if you want to be a chartered fellow of the CQI, you have to have been a member for 2 years. And when I say member, you have to have been a chartered member, MCQI, of the Chartered Quality Institute. So please bear that in mind. If you're not a chartered member at the moment, you can continue watching to see what you will need to do if you aspire towards fellowship, and I would encourage you to aspire towards fellowship because it is achievable. But if you are thinking about applying now, only chartered members can apply. So, myths. First one. Fellowship is for people approaching retirement. Some people see fellowship of an organisation like the CQI as the cherry on the top of a cake of a long career. This isn't what fellowship has to be. For some people, that is what it is. It's recognition of a lifetime contribution to quality. But for other people, it's very much something that's current and it's about them now, and it represents who they are now and what they've done so far, but there's more to come. So please don't view this as one of those things you do right at the end of your career. It's not the case. We have had people achieve fellowship in the last year who were under 40. Secondly, fellowship is for quality superstars only. Fellowship is accessible to all. It doesn't have to be the great and the good, the people who have a household name, who've written books, etc. They can apply, but actually this is for anybody who has made a significant contribution to the world of quality in multifarious ways, and we have the criteria which we'll go on to, and that will show how it's really accessible to people. You have to put the work in, but nonetheless, it's not just for the quality superstars, it's for all chartered members to aspire to. And finally, and I do hear this quite often, that fellowship is for CQI volunteers only, and because there is a limited amount of volunteering opportunities within the CQI, therefore it's impossible to become a fellow. Well, the truth is that while one of the criteria for fellowship is voluntary contributions to CQI, you can become a chartered fellow without a single second's worth of volunteering experience with the CQI. So it's not essential. It can help, but it's not essential. So those are 3 very common myths that people have about fellowship. That it's something you do at the end of your career, that it's something for other people, not for me, but for other people, because everybody else is better or more experienced, and that it's only for our volunteer community. So none of that is true or has to be true. So the fellowship process is a 2-stage process. The first stage is the application stage. We ask you to put in your training and qualifications. Not that there are any training or qualification requirements, but it helps to provide us with some context about you. We look at your work experience, and again, there are no specific work experience requirements, but it helps to place your other evidence in context and helps us to get a picture of you and your career and as a professional. But what we're not looking for, and I'll stress this probably a number of times in this presentation, we are not looking at competence, we are looking at your contribution. Key areas that we have beyond that are CPD, and all chartered members have to do CPD anyway, and so whether you're already an MCQI and you're doing CPD as part of that, that just continues in your time as a fellow. So we will be looking at your CPD evidence at the point at which you apply, to making sure that you are committed to your professionalism in that way. And then there are 5 fellowship criteria, which I will go through in detail, but those fellowship criteria have to be addressed in your application. And then finally, you require a sponsor who will vouch for you as a quality professional. It's just somebody signing off your application to say that you are somebody worthy of applying for fellowship, but there are no prerequisites of who that person has to be. They don't have to be a fellow themselves, they just have to be a person of good and reputable standing. The second stage of the application process, so if you pass the first stage, which is a desktop assessment, you get invited to interview, and the interview has 2 components. The first is a short presentation, which you do to the interview panel, and then questions and answers follow after that. If you pass the interview stage, you are a fellow. From the moment that you get called afterwards to be told that you've been successful, you are a fellow, and the certificate and everything else follows in due course. So 2-stage process, and the process is an online process now. We used to have application forms, now we have an online application process. So that was the agenda leading us through to the point here, which we have the myths and the process. We'll now move on to the application process itself. Now, as I said, it's an online process. This is a screen grab from our website. You, as a chartered member, you would click on the members area button, which takes you in to the members area of the website. You can see the top left, you've got the yellow members area indication, drop down menus, my membership, and then CQI regrade. You click on CQI regrade, and then you'll be presented with your option to regrade to fellow. That starts your fellow application. At that point, you can save your application, leave, come back, and next time you go in, you would go to My Applications, which you can see here, My Membership, and then just above CQI Regrade, you've got My Applications, and you can go back into your application, do a bit, save it, come back later at another time, do more. So that application is in the members area. That's the only way you can access it. It's secure. Any evidence that you've already put in, perhaps as part of a charter member application, that should still be in there if you've done that application online. Your core details will be in there. You might want to update those, but basically your application is all managed through here, just like everything else to do with your membership. All of these separate sections are addressed within the application, and so I'm not going to go through those in detail, but I do want to start looking at CPD, because CPD can be managed or is managed through our website. Now you can maintain CPD in another format, but you will be required to provide evidence to us of your CPD. And the easiest way to do that is through our CPD log in the members area of the website. Now we follow a plan, do, check, act process with CPD. So the first section is plan, which is where you outline your professional development objectives, what you want to achieve and why. You put in the start date, your target completion date, and the activities that you think will lead you to successfully complete that objective. Now, at the outset, that's your assumption about what will be needed and what will work, but obviously things can change. So in the next phase, which is the doing phase, you undertake activities, and some of those planned activities will deliver what you expect of them, but it may be you do other things that weren't planned as part of this, but deliver the professional development that you're looking for. So the doing phase can include the planned stuff and the non-planned stuff, and Even if it's not planned, you can then add it into your log at that point and record it and show what's happening. Now, we don't look for hours or points in terms of CPD, we are just looking at this reflective process. So you should be doing this as a chartered member anyway, but this might be a slightly different format from which you're used. So having done your activities, you then get to the check section, and you reflect on the activities that you've undertaken. Have they helped you complete that objective? Is there more to know? Do you need to add more planned activities in there to meet that objective? Does your objective need to change? Have you learned that there's more to it than you thought? That you need to really go beyond, and the scope of it is extended? That's your check process. That's looking back at what it's delivered, what your learning and your activities are delivered, and how they relate to the professional development objective. And then the act section is the what next. Have you completed the objective, in which case close it off and start a new one? Are you changing the objective, in which case amend it in the plan section? Really, you follow that cycle for an objective, that continuous plan, do, check, act until you meet the objective, in which case you replace it and you start a new one. And you should always have 3 objectives on the go at any one time. They have to be related to quality, but beyond that, it's very broad in terms of what you can use as objectives, and it's really person-centered. We are not prescribing particular CPD for you. Now, one thing I'll say about this Facebook Live, after we complete this, it will be available on Facebook. So if I am skipping through things in detail, if you want to take down more of the detail of something like this graphic, then you'll be able to watch it again, pause it. You can, I believe, rewind this live stream if you need to. But fundamentally, this will be available to you afterwards to come back and check any detail, revisit some of the things I said, if the pace of this broadcast means that some things you don't quite register first time. So moving away from CPD, moving further on to CPD, just to clarify what I said. So we're looking for 3 ongoing objectives, plus the evidence of you doing CPD whilst you're a charter member. Now, not necessarily all your time as a charter member, certainly the last year, 18 months, we'd like to see what you've been up to. We assess the CPD based on the smartness of the objectives and whether appropriate to you as a quality professional. So are they specific? They can't be very woolly and airy-fairy. So specific, are they measurable? How will you know when you've completed them? Are they achievable, realistic, timed? So we look at those to make sure that they're smart, but we're really not making a judgment about whether this is right for you. That's your decision to make, so that's the person-centered approach that still stands. Had a comment from Onika Emma saying they're an URCA member under ISO 45001. Does that qualify them to be a CQI member? That's a little outside the scope of this presentation, but basically yes. If you've qualified for an URCA, as an URCA auditor on 45001, you'd be able to apply immediately as a practitioner level, a CQI member at minimum, and quite possibly charter member. But what you wouldn't be able to do at this stage is apply for fellowship, because fellowship requires you to have been a chartered member for 2 years. But by all means, if you do want to apply to become a CQI member, that's open to you, and I can reply to you separately after this. So, fellowship criteria. I've mentioned you must have been a charter member for 2 years. Now, you can work towards your fellowship even if you don't meet the 2 years criteria. You just can't submit until you've been a charter member for 2 years. But you can be gathering the evidence or building the activities up to help you meet the criteria over that period. Even if you're not even a charter member at the moment, you can still have one eye on fellowship and be getting the experience, getting the evidence that will help you meet our criteria to such a point as when you're ready to apply, it's all there for you. And we have 5 other key criteria, and you have to meet our required level in 3 of them. So this is wordy, and again, this might be a point at which you pause, come back to it, but equally there is evidence, there is information on our website about this as well. Our website is www.quality.org. So, the 5 criteria. Firstly, have furthered the objectives of quality through voluntary contributions to the CQI. So as I said, it's one of the 5, but you can get away with not having done anything for the CQI. You're a peer-acknowledged expert with acclaimed contributions in a quality field. You've carried out outstanding service on professional committees. You've developed and supported the careers of others, especially less experienced quality professionals. And you made a voluntary contribution to the objectives of quality through other voluntary means. Now I'll go through those individually to kind of flesh out what we mean by those, but those are the 5 criteria, and 3 of those, you have to pass 3 of those in order to become a fellow. I would suggest that you address all 5 of them in the course of applying for fellowship, because even if you think you're weak in one, it's possible that sometimes that evidence can be used in support of other objectives. So I would suggest, unless you know you completely don't meet one of the criteria, that you try and measure yourself against all of them. So, fellowship criteria. In general, what we're looking for is evidence of your impact. What has changed? What is different as a result of what you did? Longevity. So how long have you been doing whatever it is for? It's possible to have short longevity and huge impact and that still be acceptable, or lesser impact but good longevity, which shows a consistency of activity. So we're not looking for loads of both, it can be a bit of a mix. And one thing we are looking for is going what we call above and beyond. So we are not looking for evidence that you are a competent quality professional. We know you are because you passed charter membership. We are looking for people who go beyond the day job, who do extra, who go the extra mile, who are advancing quality through other means other than just their day-to-day jobs. So those are the key things we look at, the key considerations. We're not looking for competence, and again, I can't stress that enough. We have a lot of applications come in where people are trying to show us how good a quality professional they are, and they don't really address the criteria. The criteria are what we measure you by. So voluntary contributions to the CQI, this can be very broadly drawn. You can be a member of a branch committee or a special interest group committee. Attending branch events, that's not a contribution that we would accept, but being part of a committee, playing an active role, definitely would. But speaking at events, that's supporting the CQI, that's doing it in a voluntary capacity, that sort of thing counts. Likewise, writing for Quality World or the knowledge section of our website, or a webinar, contributing to the activities that we do as an organisation, actually kind of meaningfully adding to them, or serving on committees. It can be drawn very, very broadly, but what we're looking for is clarity on what your role was, or what your roles were, and very often for people it's a combination of things, how long you were doing it, and what was your impact, what changed. So if you are a chair of a branch, what changed as a result of of your contribution? Where did you take it from, and where did it end up at? So with your voluntary contributions to CQI, tell us about what you did, how long you did it for, and what the impact was, if you can measure that impact. Peer acknowledged expert with acclaimed contributions in a quality field. So a couple of things to unpick. Peer acknowledged expert, people preferably outside your organisation who see you as the go-to person on something, or somebody with particular knowledge in a particular area of quality, and acclaimed contributions in a quality field. That's slightly harder to kind of define, but basically we are looking for external validation of what you've done in a particular area. So we want to know, what is your area of expertise? Are you an improvement specialist? Are you a supply chain specialist? How has that expertise made a difference? So what impact have you had with that knowledge, with that specialism? Who recognises it? So are people asking you to write about it in a publication, or present about it at a conference? People outside of your organisation who see you as somebody with particular expertise. So who are they, and how is it recognised? Provide us with evidence that you are indeed this peer acknowledged expert. So within a lot of organisations, you will be maybe the lead on a particular thing, and that's why being the peer acknowledged expert in your organisation might be a little bit too close to just doing your day job. But there are some huge organisations out there, multinational organisations, where there'll be a number of people in your role and you are acknowledged as the expert and the lead on something within that huge organisation, and you can bring that forward as part of this. The third criterion, have carried out outstanding service on professional committees. Now, a few examples here. It could be an industry-wide body, so if you're working in the nuclear industry, it could be a body that has stakeholders from different organisations within your industry. It could be pan-sector, so it could be, or maybe actually that would be better written as cross-sector. So it could be, again, nuclear and construction and other bodies where you represent either your sector or your organisation on something that, again, is bigger than your organisation. It could be a standards body. You could work with ISO or BSI or the CQI or another quality-related body, but it's about your contribution on these committees. In most cases, it wouldn't be an internal committee to your organisation. And we want to see what you did on the committee and what difference you made. So again, it's not enough to necessarily have been occupying a seat on a committee, but what difference did you make? Were there working groups where you played a lead role? Did you draft something that got adopted by a committee? What was your contribution? What was the impact? What was the longevity? To have supported the careers of others, especially less experienced quality professionals. Now, I'm going to skip down here just a little bit and say this is not about being a good line manager. This is not about managing people well and their careers going on to be successful. It's about more than that. It can include that. You can show good evidence, but really, if that's all you've got, that won't be enough. So it can include things like formal mentoring and coaching. We have a mentoring program at CQI. A number of people use their involvement in that as evidence for fellowship applications. It's not enough to just be enrolled on it. You actually have to be mentoring people, and ideally you have to have seen the result of that mentoring. It has to have come to a conclusion. It doesn't have to be formal, it can be coaching, but in order to evidence this, it's great to have testimonials. But you can also support the careers of others doing other things. You can be involved in teaching, lecturing, addressing groups of sort of next generation quality professionals. You could be a STEM ambassador going into schools. And it is possible to use things within your organisation if you have made a step change within that organisation to support the development of others. Maybe you've instituted a mentoring scheme internally. There are all sorts of ways you can do it using your internal experience. But what I'd say is it can't just be your day-to-day activity. We're looking for more than that, because we assume that all quality professionals are competent, and as line managers are good as line managers. So we want to see what you've done, the impact you made, and testimonials can have a really big impact here. And finally, to have made a voluntary contribution to the objectives of quality through other voluntary means. Now this can be activity outside of your 9-to-5 work. It can be absolutely nothing to do with work. We have people who've been school governors and they've applied their quality knowledge in their role as a school governor. We've had people who are volunteers at a church or a youth group or scouts and things like that. And again, if they're employing quality principles, tools and techniques outside of their work environment, they are advancing the world of quality through that volunteering. Now we can include activity that started as a work activity and then developed. So you started by representing your organisation on a body, and then you got voted as chair of that body, and you took a project on board, and you did that project, and it was nothing to do with your work, and you didn't have to do it. So that can be included. And I say broadly though, we are looking for activity that's not related to work, but you use your skills and knowledge. So this is a very broad criterion that allows you to bring in things that maybe aren't covered by the other criteria. But equally, some experience can be used to meet more than one criteria. That it's the same experience, but you're bringing out a different aspect of it. So you need to support your statements with evidence. For example, any documentary evidence, minutes of reports if you're a committee volunteer or serving on committees or a CQI volunteer, testimonials. If you've written articles, then include a copy of that article. Whatever evidence you have, as long as it ties you to the statements you're making. It's not useful to us if the evidence shows that something happened but it's not clear what your role was. So we are looking to see how you are tied to that particular piece of that particular statement against that criteria. So you're assessed against your application. It's a desktop assessment by one of the CQI's assessors. If you're successful in convincing them that you meet a minimum of 3 of the criterion, you then move to fellowship interview stage. Now, it can be physical or remote interviews. Right now, all of our fellowship interviews, for obvious reasons, are remote. But outside of pandemic situations, we do hold physical interviews at the CQI offices and potentially at other venues as well. There is a panel of 3 people on the interview. One of them is somebody representing the head of profession, and they are there to ensure that professional standards are maintained. I generally attend, representing the CQI sort of administrative side, the membership process side, so I'm there to make sure the process is followed. And then we also always have a third person who is a fellow of the CQI, and they are the peer reviewer on there to see whether you are an appropriate person to join the ranks of the fellows. So between the 3 of us, we've got different perspectives on your interview, and the questions that you'd receive will be kind of different because we're coming at it from different angles. The format of the interview is that you will produce a 15-minute presentation of how you meet the criteria. Now, the best presentations are essentially your greatest hits, and you are not going into huge depth, but you are just telling us the real high points against each of the criteria, and we can always ask extra questions if we want to afterwards. So rather than going deep into the detail, give us the overarching narrative of how you meet the criteria. We recommend 1 or 2 slides about your background, so you set the stage, a bit of context about yourself to start with, and then 1 or 2 slides for each of the criteria thereafter. So we're looking perhaps a maximum of 12 slides in that 15 minutes, and that's more than enough for us. And the same, we can ask questions afterwards because the rest of the interview is a 30-minute Q&A where we delve a bit further beneath the surface of your presentation to see if there are things that particularly interest us or perhaps weren't quite so clear in your application, and we want to just see if there's any more to know about it to really help us form a decision. So we have that interview, and ideally we try and let people know the result on the day of the interview, but that's not always possible, but we let you know as soon as possible. If you aren't successful, we will give you in-depth feedback about where we felt you needed to improve, which will help you be successful next time. We always say that if you're not successful, it's not a no, it's a not yet. And that might sound cheesy, but that's really what we believe, because you won't even get to fellowship interview stage if you're not close. So view it, if it happens to you, as a not yet rather than a no, and you will have all the help from us to be successful next time. So this is way too detailed for a slide, but I'm just putting it up here to try and be transparent about how we score. This is our scoring matrix for interviews, but also for the initial assessment. On the left, it goes from 5 at the top to 1 at the bottom. You need to score a 4 or a 5. So in order to pass a criterion, you need to show level 4, evidence of a significant contribution and impact, evidence of going above and beyond the requirements of your employment, evidence of sustained commitment to the criterion. Now, we will be judging you against those, and maybe you're stronger in one than the other, but that's the sort of thing we're looking at. And then at level 5, we are looking for sort of exceptional contributions and impact, long-standing commitments. So it's really people who've gone the extra mile and then some. But if you're just showing us that you're a really good quality professional, but you're within the parameters of what we might expect a quality professional chartered member to be, then you would be scored a 3, and that's not enough to get you over the line in terms of fellowship. So those are the criteria. Just see if there are any comments. So this is our Facebook Live on fellowship. I'm shortly going to go into the top tips because you've seen the process, you've seen the criteria, and this is how we score it. So our top tips, or my top tips, for a successful application. So the first top tip, make an honest assessment of how you measure up against the criteria. Look at each one in turn, maybe bullet point your strengths against it, and be brutally honest with yourself, because this is a serious process to go through and it does require quite a lot of work. If you feel that you might need extra work, then create an improvement plan. If you can identify where you can add more experience and more evidence, then this is what you should do from the outset. You're plotting your way to fellowship. This is not a temperature check to see whether you're there already. For a lot of people, you need to look at the criteria and think, actually, I need a bit more evidence on community service or volunteering for the CQI. I need to do a bit more to meet that criteria. And you make your plan, and perhaps over the course of a year, you can get the evidence that you need in order to achieve that. Second, seek advice and sense check. Whether it's from your colleagues, from a branch, you can go join the mentoring scheme as a mentee and see if somebody will support you through the process or apply for fellowship. But doing this in isolation is difficult. It's not impossible. By all means, it's absolutely not impossible. But if people are pushing you, challenging you, questioning you on what you're putting together in your application, then the likelihood is your application will be stronger for it. I said earlier, address all the criteria if you can, because you never know when we will look at it and think, well, actually, I wasn't so sure about what they said there, but actually this piece of information, that supports it. And we are looking to pass you. We are looking for people to join the ranks of fellows, and we're not looking for things to trip you up and exclude you. We're looking for reasons to pass you. So if you address all the criteria, even if you're weak and even if you know you're going to fail on one of them, there might be enough extra evidence in there that we will use to get you over the line in another criterion. Focus on the criteria. Really address them. Don't try and convince us that you're good at your job. We know that already. So focus on the expertise. So, and particularly with the peer acknowledged expert criterion, it's very easy to then just talk about projects you've done, etc. That doesn't demonstrate peer acknowledged expertise. It just demonstrates expertise. We want to see the people from outside who've recognised it, who've gone to you for advice, who've asked you to get involved in things. So focus on those criteria. I said earlier, you can use the same experience for multiple criteria if you make that relevance clear. So you have to still address the criteria, but you can use the same activity to address different criteria in different ways. Talk about your contribution, your impact. It's really easy for all good team players to talk about we did this and we did that, but we're assessing you. This is a personal application, so we are looking at what you did, so talk about your contribution and your impact, and that will help us to assess whether you are ready for fellowship. Evidence, again, is about you. Link you to your statements, include testimonials. Make it absolutely clear to us that you did what you said you did, that it had impact, and other people are backing you up on that. Keep your presentation short and on brief. So we said 15 minutes. There is a little wiggle room, but we don't want to hear very long, rambly presentations, and we don't want people to go off topic because that becomes very problematic for us. So I'd say keep it short and on brief, and address each of the criteria in turn. And that way you know you've covered everything you need to cover. Do those greatest hits, as I said earlier. 9. This is kind of harder to quantify, but in interviews, show your passion. We love it if we see people who are passionate about quality, who really live and breathe it and show that it matters to them, that it's a source of personal, professional pride, that it is something that runs right the way through them. Show your passion, because we love seeing passionate people in the interview stage. It's brilliant. It helps to engage us, and it helps to see inside you. And as I said earlier, if you're unsuccessful, take it as a not yet rather than a no. We generally at interview stage we pass minimum 75% of people because they've already gone through one assessment process. But we do have some who don't make it, and usually it's because there's one criterion that they haven't quite convinced us on, and we tell them what they would need to do in order to get over that last hurdle. It's rare that it's more than one. So it really is a case of going away, revising your presentation, getting more evidence, and coming back. And if it is a matter of one criterion that you need to meet, your second interview focuses on that. It doesn't focus on the ones that we've already considered you as having passed. So that's my 10 top tips. I'll quickly go through those once more, just as a recap. I can see I've got a question from Neil O'Doherty, so I'll cover that in a second. And if you have any other questions, please put them into the comments box, and I'll be quite happy to answer those. So, fellowship top tips number 1: make an honest assessment at the outset of how you measure up against the criteria. And then if you see there are any gaps, or if you see there are any areas where you need to improve, make an improvement plan. And take your time about it. You don't have to rush to achieve fellowship. If it's going to take a year, 18 months, 2 years to get the extra experience or impact under your belt, then take that time. This is something where, this is our top membership grade. As I said, we are looking to try and pass people, but equally we are maintaining the standard of that grade, and so we aren't a pushover. You can't blag your way to this grade. So doing that honest assessment at the outset is going to put you in the strongest position to put together a strong application. Related to that, seek advice and sense check with others. Get support if you need it to help you through this process. Address all the criteria if you can, because addressing all the criteria allows us to see you in the round, and it allows us to see whether some evidence can be reapplied to other criteria. In your application, just like an interview, focus on the criteria, focus on addressing what we're looking for. Don't try and convince us that you're good at your job. We are looking for how you relate to those criteria, and that alone. And you can use the same experience for multiple criteria if you make that relevance clear, so that's fine. Talk about your contribution and your impact. We're interested in you. We're not really interested in other people unless those other people are supporting what you're saying. And that links us to evidence, where all your evidence must link you to your statements and include testimonials. Keep your presentation when you get to the interview stage short and on brief, addressing the topic, and address each of the criteria in turn, so it's very clear what you're saying and how it applies to our membership criteria. Show your passion, because we love passionate quality professionals, and if you're unsuccessful, take it as a not yet rather than a no. This is a tough process. People come out of the fellowship interviews knowing that they have been grilled, and I'm not saying that to try and put you off, but for fellowship to mean something, it has to be challenging. So sometimes people won't succeed, but take it as a not yet rather than a no. So Neil has asked a couple of questions. How long is sustained? Well, a little bit. How long is a piece of string? So again, it comes down to the combination of a sustained contribution and impact. So you could have had a very short involvement in something, but your impact was huge, and that's fine. But if your impact is is slightly less measurably large, then we're looking for something that might be certainly longer than a year. I would suggest usually more than 2 years if we're talking about sort of general involvement in something, because that's more that shows a commitment over a period of time. So it's hard to put a number on, otherwise we'd be saying, you must have been on a certain committee for 3 years or whatever. But we are looking at this combination of impact and how long your contribution has been for, and how you've gone above and beyond, and we take all of that into consideration. So for some things we would say, CQI volunteering, the length of time is actually probably more important than in some of the activities. But if you've written for Quality World, then that stands alone. So it's a little tricky to answer. Now you've put there's a follow-up question Neil's put about one of the ISO technical committees, and again I think without diving into detail on that would certainly be applicable to the service on committees one. And if you were involved for the entire lifetime of a piece of work, I'm trying to interpret what you're saying here, but if you were you were involved for a lifetime of a piece of work within that committee, then that would be absolutely fine, because we're seeing a narrative. Try and tell us a story about what you got involved in, what you did, what your impact was, etc. So if you've been involved in that for a long time, or if it was a short-lived thing but it had a big impact, just give us that context and that understanding, and that will help us to work out where you fit in that mix, that Venn diagram of length of contribution, impact, and going above and beyond. Derek apologises for joining late. No need to worry, Derek. There'll be people watching this on catch-up, and that's absolutely fine. That's what these sessions are for. In a COVID-19 world, are you looking at remote interviews? Yep, Derek, since March we've been doing all of our fellow interviews remotely. They've all been using Teams, which is what we use internally at the CQI. It's been working very well. Next week I think we've got our third set of fellow interviews using Teams. It works very well. We run through in advance of the interviews themselves. One of our team members will liaise with interviewees, get you used to the software, get you experienced in sharing your screen, because not everybody uses Teams, so we make sure that you're familiar with the software and how it will all work, so that when you come to the actual interview itself, you're not stressing about the technology. All you're considering on is giving the best account of yourself as possible. So, are there any questions? Are there any things that I skipped through a little quickly that you'd like a bit more detail on? Neil and Derek, I hope I've answered your questions effectively, but if not, feel free to contact me after the meeting. My email address is gkingston, GKINGSTON, @quality.org. So feel free to follow up with any questions if you have them there. If there's anybody on the line who has any particular questions they'd like me to answer now, then I'd be happy to do so. Full guidance is available both on the website, CQI website, which is www.quality.org, and once you start your fellowship regrade, then you will be able to find there is also inline guidance as part of that process. Thanks, Neil. I'm glad that that answered your question. So that has been today's Facebook Live on CQI Fellowship. Thank you very much to everybody who's joined me. Thank you if you're watching this on catch-up. I hope we've been able to answer questions. I hope it's demystified the process of fellowship. We want more CQI fellows. It's a community that is got some amazing people in it, and we want more amazing people in it. But it is a community that any charter member can aspire to joining. Oh, another question from Derek. One further contribution. Do contributions for other quality organisations count for consideration for fellowship? E.g., I'm heavily involved with ASQ as well as CQI. Absolutely, Derek. So if we look at the criteria, You've got voluntary contributions to the aims of quality, which is criteria number 5. Any of your voluntary work for ASQ, whatever that is like, that could apply there. That demonstrates your commitment beyond the CQI. Likewise, if you're involved in committees with a body like ASQ or another body, British Quality Foundation, any international body that's related to quality, that could be applicable to this service on committees, as well as the voluntary contributions to the aims of quality. So absolutely, this is not about a CQI closed shop. This is not about us trying to reward just our volunteers. And one of the myths I tried to explode at the outset was that you can achieve fellowship without doing a single second worth of volunteering for the CQI. This is open to all. As long as you've been a chartered member for 2 years at the point of application, you can meet this requirement. So yeah, if you've been involved in another quality body or a quality forum that exists within a profession or an industry, bring that to the table. We want to know about that, because we know that the quality profession is incredibly diverse. It manifests itself in many different ways in different sectors, industries, and that our quality professionals within our membership are just so diverse that there is no mould that we would seek to fit people into. So tell us what you've done, tell us the impact, tell us the duration, tell us how you've gone above and beyond, and we will love to see that diversity of experience brought into our applications. So thank you very much for that comment, Derek, much appreciated. Likewise, much appreciated to Neil for your comments, and Myeka Emma for your question. Again, to clarify, fellowship is only available to chartered members of the CQI, and you must have been a chartered member for a minimum of 2 years before applying, but anybody can aspire to it. If you're not a chartered member, there are going to be more steps to go through, i.e. getting charter membership first, building your portfolio of experience, and then applying for fellowship, but it is a realistic ambition and aim for all people. And thank you, Derek. Thanks for confirming that I covered your question. That's great. At this point, I think, unless there are any other questions about fellowship, I will draw this broadcast to a close. This video will be available on Facebook after this event, so please do check back in and view it. As long as there are no technical glitches, it will be there for you to see. We will be running further fellowship Facebook Lives and webinars, so if something occurs to you, you can attend one of those in the future and ask questions, or you can email me on gkingston@quality.org, or you can email our membership team at membership@quality.org, and we'd all be delighted to help you. But for now, I'll say thank you very much for your time and for your attention, and I'll say goodbye, and please stay safe, and I'll see you hopefully at a future webinar.